We got them yesterday. We had a work session.
It takes a minute. Oh, thank you. I am.
6:30, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Consent agenda. There's just the minutes of the consent agenda. What do you want to remove it or take a motion to accept it? Yes.
Motion. Second.
Thank you, Jeff. Martha? Are we voting live or?
Yes, because Rick can vote. Rick, are you voting? Oh, look at that. Oh, you know what?
I don't see it on screen, so.
Don't. Everyone said Jeff.
Virtual meeting.
All right.
I'll fix that.
Like a big fireplace.
7 yes,
6.
6 yes.
Liam?
Yes, I voted.
Perfect.
For the good of the cause, everybody's here. Moving on to reports, budget status report.
I guess that would be me.
Mr. Wood?
Well, I'm happy to report that things are progressing as normal in terms of the world of the finances here. If you look at it, really not much change from last month in terms of our revenue. Property tax at this point has now it's up to the county to help bring in the rest of it. So we won't probably see much of the change. I do want to highlight, you'll notice, I don't think, if you remember in previous ones, we had a larger charges for services. It's a BOCES thing. If you look on the revenue budget status, you'll see there's an actual line dealing with refunds for BOCES services. If you look back, that originally was a little higher, about $100,000 higher. We didn't lose that revenue, it just was initially put in the wrong spot. So it got moved to its proper location, and that's, if you've been following along with these reports, you might say, oh gee, why is this, $100,000 difference in this one specific line? That's the reason. We didn't lose it, it just got moved to where it really belonged and all that. Another highlight, we're starting to see some aid coming in from the state, so that is a difference from last month to this month. But all said, we are right about the same. Last year we 85.3% revenue at this point, we're 84.91%. Expenditures, same thing. I'm not going to go through all line by line. In the end, if you look at it, we're a little up from last year in terms of our expenditures, 36.17% versus 35.51%. So, and you'll see that salaries is where you're seeing that change, 29% last year to 33%. All within the range in terms of where we are with our budget status.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a question about why, and this is just, why are we only at, why is it we at 84%? What's the 16 or 15 something percent gap?
Most of our state aid actually has not come in yet. Generally speaking, the way it happens is how our state aid comes out. So it's broken over several periods. In the actual first couple periods, it's They say we're getting it, but it's really, rather than us paying the retirement system, they take what is due and we just move that retirement system money that we're holding on to and we put it into the revenue accounts. So that's really what it is. The state always kind of strings it along a little bit, as well as aid. It doesn't come in all at the beginning of the year.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, moving on to the treasurer's report.
Treasury reports, same there. Operating funds, total balance from previous month was a little over $15 million. Had about 574,000 go out. Receipts, disbursements, excuse me, a little more than that. You'll see that cash disbursements. Credit charges, things like that. Basically, the key there with this report is looking at our available balance. It's a little over $14 million. And again, that's largely because of our property tax revenue has come in and is sitting there, and that'll slowly dwindle as the year goes on as we pay our expenses. But if you look at it, we don't have a lot of outstanding checks, $569,000. So again, we're pretty much on what we're typically has been in the past in terms of all that. And the books are balanced another month.
Yay.
That's good.
My question is on the two big checks, the 309,000 and the, so check number 23150 and 23151, just because they stick out.
Scrolling down. You on the second page of that
Yeah, I'm on
report?
the second page, outstanding checks.
Right, the 309,000. That is our ERS. So we pay. So it's we have two retirement systems. One for the teaching staff, the TRS, and one for the civil service staff, ERS. TRS, the state deducts what we should be paying off of our state aid, and ERS, we actually send them a check. And that's what that is. And there are different times of the year as well. One is paying forward, one is, like TRS, we've collected the money already, and ERS is we plan for it and we're paying the bill ahead of time. So that's what that big one is.
I think the other thing to notice in there is the dates, right? So this report is as of the end of November.
Yep.
So even though, today it's almost the end of December, the report was November 30th, so that was just one day after the check was written.
Health and safety for buildings and grounds.
That's me too.
Monopolizing the whole meeting.
That's right.
Good thing you're entertaining.
I try. You see here we met, Jeff was there representing the board. We had Bill, Sonia, and Teresa, myself. Basically, we just did an update. These are the quarterly meetings that we have. We did an update of the capital projects. Prior to this meeting, you'll see on the 29th of November, Mosaic Architects were in here to kind of do they called it a final run through of the drawings. Really, it was just kind of cleaning up some things. The electrical engineer was here to kind of highlight some of the work that's going to happen. Up here, particularly how it relates to the oval and impacts the oval, replacing electrical lines. And Brad Hathaway was here again, just not in this meeting, but with the Mosaic one. Brad was here, as well as Orda was present at that meeting, so we can kind of go through. We looked at the track, and there was some alternatives that were brought up in terms of suggestions for the track. Right now it's scheduled to be resurfaced, and John Burdick and Jeff Jakes had brought up possibly looking at if there is money available to remove the pole vaulting pits, which has never been used since it's been put in, and turning it into another jumping pit, so that when we host sectionals or qualifiers, we can have a long jump pit and a triple jump pit running. A lot of schools have a dual pit system. Pole vaulting, they have not had pole vaulting up here since I was in school. In fact, I like to say that I was one of the last Seneca Lake pole vaulters back in 1985, 86, 7th, 9th grader, and then they did away with it for the section. So it's been gone for over 20 years up here. So looking at that and looking at track on the ends of the soccer field, looking at making that one surface as opposed to grass and then runways. Again, if you go to some newer tracks, the ends of the soccer fields or football fields where the corners are on the tracks, it's all one paved surface. Easier for maintenance and things like that. So that was an add-on, an alternative in terms of if the money's there. So we just kind of talked about that. So there did come up about the signs at the elementary school and at the middle high school here. No concerns were brought up in terms of what the plan is for the signage here. But Sonia and Bill did express a desire to rethink the no digital sign at the elementary school, and basically saying that it had kind of gone away from that at the elementary school and just kind of have the lettering, a little updated version as to what's there now, but still going out there and physically putting up the letters to create the messages. So we had some discussion there. I don't know if you want to share anything with that conversation.
Yeah, a little bit. Only that there was sort of a question about, there was a sort of a they, in quotes, didn't want to do it. I don't know. We never kind of established who they are, whether it's the local residents around the elementary school, or I think it really pertains to the elementary school, not so much the middle high school.
Yes.
And so I think Sonia and Bill made a very compelling argument about why it should be there, or that would be a better option for them. Does anybody know why it was,
Yeah.
it's kind of turned out okay?
Yeah, no, it originally came, that whole conversation started originally, both of our signs were projected to be electronic.
Right.
And then among our many stops along the way in our discussions on the capital project, we did visit the village board. The village board, shared with us the code which restricted those kinds of things, understanding that we're not held to the same code as private businesses are, but did express an interest in us, maintaining that general standard. We also had some feedback from our discussions around the community, so we did get feedback on please limiting or eliminating, in this case, the electronic signs. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where that came from. It came from those original discussions, and I know, as Dana pointed out, the school people are still, concerned about not being able to get the message out when they want to. This time of year, it's very hard for anyone at the elementary school to put up, letters on the sign. So it's probably something we should, make some kind of, final decision on and recognize the different sides of the issue.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Then we talked a little bit about the stone facade here, the emergency project out front, and it's been approved. We awarded, you guys approved Mid-State Industries, and then winter came. So basically, we're on a holding pattern until the weather cooperates where they can start. Our best guess is springtime. Ideally, it would be nice if they can do both the work over spring break, where it has very little disruption. Even though it's an outside project, there's going to be noise and things like that. So that is the hope. But in the end, we got to leave it up to Mother Nature in terms of when they can get up here and work safely outside to repair it correctly. And then we had reports from the buildings. Bobby Graham was unable to attend the meeting, so basically Bill just gave a little update in terms of some of the things that they've had at the building level there, reporting dishwasher issues, fixing that. The fire system, they had two different systems. They got like a strobe and a sound, and they're going to replace it. It's all one type rather than having two different ways that people are hearing it. They're looking at, Bill had mentioned that the water tower there, when they had the energy performance contract come in, they disconnected this control panel that was kind of used as a sensor. So if it was, overheating, wherever that, the control panel would activate so that it would, alarms go off, and, Bill wanted to look at getting that reconnected, because he truly doesn't understand why they disconnected it in the first place. He doesn't see it as an energy efficient thing. In fact, he thinks it's the opposite, because you don't know if something's going wrong with the water tower, because the control panel is not operational. So he's gotten a quote from that, and that's moving forward in terms of processing that and all that. So a quote just came in, and they're going to be in the process of getting that fixed as well as working on the generator and stuff like that. Again, little things that he doesn't see. These are just normal maintenance items that come up, and they're working on. And the last thing we looked at was a stop loss insurance checklist. We got that from our insurance carrier, Gordon Pratt. Roger and I met with them for almost 2 hours, and kind of did a review of our policy. And one of the things they talked about was just having, it's a 4-page checklist, and just kind of going through and just reviewing the buildings and seeing if the things on this checklist are being done. And as a quick glance, as we're going through it, a lot of the things were able to be checked off. Some things were, like sprinkler system. Well, we don't have a sprinkler system outside watering the grass and stuff like that. It doesn't apply. But asked that each building kind of go back and kind of do a walkthrough just to see. It's not a compliance thing, with the insurance, but he just says it's good to do, just to kind of make sure that we have most of these items on this list that we're doing on a regular basis. And quickly looking, yeah, it does appear that way. So that was the meeting for the quarter. Looking forward to the next one.
Any questions? Okay, moving along. Superintendent's report.
I have a couple of things I want to talk about tonight. One, I think as we get closer to budget season, it's important to start recognizing some of the issues and preparing ourselves for what to expect. And we typically have 2 main sources of revenue. One of them are property taxes, and so when we put together our budget, there'll be a recommendation for what our property taxes, can be or should be. The other is state aid. So we have a lot of control within the tax cap, or I guess having to consider the tax cap with our property taxes. We don't have a lot of control over state aid, so we're constantly monitoring and evaluating what to expect and what we might expect. So this time of year, we do get recommendations or groups recommend what the state aid should be, in particular the state aid increases. And so right now, since our last meeting, 2 groups have weighed in. Right? One of them is the Educational Conference Board, and the other is the Board of Regents. So just to clarify, the Educational Conference Board represents the key education associations. So this is NISPA, the Council of School Superintendents, the Teachers Union, NISA, the PTA, SANES, and that's the School Administrators Group, and then it also represents the Big 5, the city school districts. So these groups get together and pool their ideas and then come out with recommendations. So just to share some highlights of those with you, and then to contrast those with the second set of recommendations, or I guess really compare, because in many ways they're very similar, the Board of Regents. So the Board of Regents, of course, runs education in the state of New York, oversees the Department of Education. So both of the agencies recommending something similar, the $2.1 billion increase in state aid. Just to contrast that a bit, last year state aid increased just under $1 billion. So they're recommending a significantly larger increase than was granted last year. Just to break this down a little bit, maybe talk about some of the issues, because they're going to come back again on us a few times. One of them is the bulk of that aid. So both the Educational Conference Board and the Board of Regents are recommending that most of that increase go to what's called foundation aid. And foundation aid is where most state aid is directed, and it's part of a formula. And the formula is intended to provide a greater amount of state aid to the highest need school districts and lower amounts for lower needs school districts. I always like to mention kind of how this applies to Lake Placid, right? So Lake Placid, we are considered an average need school district, and our foundation aid is it's considered we're considered to already be receiving the maximum amount of foundation aid. So when they discuss increases in foundation aid, they are recommending that the bulk of the increase go to higher need districts and a much smaller amount to average need districts like ours. We have been referred to as a save harmless school. In other words, when they talk about applying foundation aid formulas, they do talk about districts like ours as being in this save harmless. In other words, please don't reduce their state aid. Right? Because if you followed the formula purely, that's what would happen. So we're considered, rightly or wrongly, and I'm going to argue wrongly, an overfunded district. So when the discussions are about foundation aid, you want to make sure you know how that applies to us. And so typically what happens is these proposals are made, a very small amount of that is, typically we are considered safe harmless, so somewhere between 0 and a very small amount is directed to us initially. And then, depending on how the negotiations go in the legislature, it turns out usually differently. How much differently, that's sort of an annual event, right? Last year, we did receive, a small increase. So even though we were a safe, harmless school district, we received a small increase. So the foundation aid formulas aren't always 100% followed, and a lot of that is dependent on what goes on in these negotiations, right? So, so these recommendations are being made now. The executive branch, Governor Cuomo, will make recommendations after the new year, and then that will then be handed over to the legislature, and along with the governor, they'll begin their negotiations, which, as you probably know, end sometime around April 1st. Let me just get back to some of the numbers, though, just so that you know the kinds of things we're talking about. So we're talking about foundation aid increases from both groups. That's what they're recommending. They're also recommending increases in reimbursement aid. So reimbursement aid, it's a little bit different. It's this is money that is reimbursed to school districts after it's been spent in particular areas. So the areas, the most common areas are transportation aid, building aid, BOCES aid. We get reimbursed a certain percentage. Or I think building aid reimbursement's about 29.9%. BOCES aid is somewhere around 36. Reimbursement somewhere around 36%. So they're talking about increases in reimbursement aid. So we, again, that's a piece of state aid that we also have to pay attention to. And then they're making recommendations in very specific areas, very targeted areas. The Educational Conference Board is recommending increases in money directed towards, in this case it's $500 million recommended to be directed towards school safety, mental health, and school climate measures. Mental health being high on everybody's list for needs. As a matter of fact, I'll say that you may have read this in some of your NISPA information. We do see enrollment declines throughout upstate New York, but in contrast to that, we're seeing increases in need for services for smaller groups of students. So even though we're seeing a decline overall enrollment, we are seeing an increase in high need areas. So, and that's areas like mental health being, very specifically directed, and that's in law last year, and that's in, Need Express this year. Other kinds of areas that are being discussed is supporting the new federal law, that's the ESSA or ESSA. And then there's always amount of money directed towards, recommended to be directed towards English language learners, and that being very important, especially in urban areas and other areas with high immigrant populations. In the Board of Regents recommendations, there are some differences, and they identify a few very specific areas that they would like to see money directed towards. Some of these are very important to Lake Placid. CTE programs, so the work-related programs that we have at our BOCES Center. Pre-K 4. As a matter of fact, they're talking about an increase of $26 million in Pre-K 4. We have one of the, sorry to confuse you here, one of the 7 pre-K programs that are specific allocations in state funding. Ours is the highest level of funding. And so when they talk about those kinds of increases, they're talking about expanding pre-K. And hopefully, I really do believe hopefully that's to promote more programs like ours, because our program is a high quality program, a real model program throughout the state, and that's been recognized by our state Office of Early Learning. Other areas that they're talking about are school climate and bullying prevention, expanding access to high quality coursework, right? So that students have access to everything from CTE programs to AP programs to all kinds of other academic areas. And then because they're the Board of Regents, they're also talking about higher education. So they also oversee higher education. So I won't go into all the very specific recommendations, but I think the number one thing to note is that we're talking about over $2 billion increase that they're recommending. That foundation aid is a high priority, and we'll see how all this plays out once it comes through the next level and then the level after that, and all the negotiations are over. So stay tuned, because we'll continue to come back for more. In terms of what we can do to influence this is we do have the ears of our Assembly and Senate members. I know that I had the privilege of meeting with them last month, and board members will be invited to attend an advocacy session, probably end of January, early February. We've done it every year. It's usually a breakfast on a Friday, and that gives board members an opportunity to speak, to listen, and to advocate, both for funding in general, but also for specific areas. And they listen. They do pay attention to us. So that's the first thing, the state aid recommendations. Second thing is just what's going on here. So we are getting close to the end. We're almost on our holiday break. School will be closed on Friday the 21st. So we go through Thursday, and then school is closed on Friday. We're also closed on Monday the 31st, Tuesday the 1st, and we reopen on Wednesday, January 2nd. So we're about to hit our holiday break. But between now and then, we still have some things going on. Pajama Day and Polar Express Day at the elementary school. There were movies, a big movie excursion today for the elementary school students, and a similar one on Thursday for the middle school. Also on Thursday, and this is the last day before break, the high school welcomes back graduates for a panel discussion. They'll meet with juniors and seniors. And then the senior class will host its annual senior dinner meal. In terms of the panel, if any board members are interested, they typically linger for anywhere from a half hour to an hour afterwards, and are willing to meet and talk with non-students, those of us with grayer hair, and let us know how they perceive their efforts in school influenced their success or progress in college or in whatever career field they're in. So depending on who comes, and it's kind of hit and miss depending on who's home and who's willing and who can get up that early, we learn lots of different things. I know Mr. Wood's been involved in many of these discussions over the years. I have, and you know, board members are invited to attend that. I'm estimating 10:30 on Thursday at the high school. If
Thursday the
anybody's
20th?
available and anybody's interested.
Thursday the 20th, this Thursday.
Yes, right. So it's right after they meet with students. We ask them to stick around and meet with us.
Yes, rather.
Hmm?
I'm interested.
Great. And then in other areas, you know, in case you're interested and you're looking for something to do over the holidays, you should know that there are some hockey and basketball games during the break. There's a Nordic Ski Invitational on December 29th in Queensbury. Seems like, at least from our perspective up here, there's going to be snow. And then just after the break, our Science Olympiad team will be traveling to their second invitational tournament in East Greenbush, New York. Columbia High School.
Columbia High School.
So that's everything I have. Look forward to, of course, seeing you at our next board meeting. And I'm just going to remind you all, we are not meeting on New Year's Day, even though we're scheduled for that. So take that day off, enjoy time with your family, and we'll see you back on January 15th. And that's everything I have. Did you get all that?
Okay, information for the board. There's 2 pieces there for tenure that will be coming up probably sometime in January.
Yes.
So moving on, linking goals with agenda items.
Okay, I got a couple. So, let's go to start with under reports, 3A, B, and C, under goal number 6, finance. And then, we haven't got to this yet, but under personnel items, 6A and B, goal number 2, education, and also goal number 6, finance. And 7A, special ed, goal number 1, students versus.
Covers a lot. Any others?
I try to be fair.
No, that's good. Okay, moving on to discussion, school board retreat. Martha's brought up at previous meetings that would like to get together and do a retreat with the board. Rick has mentioned at times about trying to tie it to the school strategic plan. So your thoughts of when, possibly who would officiate it? You know, do we hire somebody, you know, or go through NISBA? Looking for thoughts, feedback.
I can share with you, Colleen called me because she wasn't able to make the meeting, and she just wanted to weigh in. She thought the idea of getting together informally was a great idea, because she agrees that, you know, it'd be nice to get to know each other more. She was more interested in the informal than the formal retreat. And that was just where she was coming from.
Yeah, I think if we do this as a formal retreat, then it should be tied to the strategic plan, and either one, you know, modifying it, because we do have to do this every couple of years anyway, right? With the strategic plan. We should, and so if it's tied to that, then sure. Or if it's specifically dealing with something in our board objectives, then yeah, and how we go about doing that, I think that's something that we all have to just figure out and agree on. But I'm all for the informal get together as well. I think that's a good idea. I'm in. Put it that way.
I think it's a good idea. I take when I was doing the self-evaluation, there was a part about discussing, I think, 3 years, 5-year plan. And I would like to see that we're gonna have a formal retreat that we would, again, revisit our strategic goals, but also that with an eye in towards the future, and sort of anticipating some of the trends that we are seeing.
Yeah, for instance, like on our strategic plan, goal number one is number one for a reason, but safety is becoming, I think, a bigger and bigger issue in our discussions, and maybe that is something that maybe could be added to the plan as a more prominent bullet point. I mean, it already is, but just as more as a structural or procedural thing. But anyway, that's not exactly tying into this, but yeah, things like that, if you're going to update the plan, those types of things, which Lee just said.
I like the idea of getting together as informal, seeing that almost half the board are new board members. And as far as a formal retreat, I agree with going with something in our plan, the strategic plan. So that's where I stand. And we did have a retreat, was it a couple of years ago, where we met in here, and I thought that was very, very informative.
So where does that leave us?
Well, if we do informal, I guess my question is the open meeting law, is it considered a meeting? Is it a retreat? Can we meet?
If we're just discussing goals, then it certainly, we are making a decision regarding the district, so it can be just a retreat or I won't say a closed meeting, but if we don't have to publicize it and that type of thing. But if we're going to be making any, formal decisions or movement towards decision-making processes, then it has to be an open meeting law. And the other thing that, if you can hear me.
No, we can hear you.
Okay, if we get into reestablishing or renewing our strategic plan, that's a very lengthy process involving, not only the board, but principals, the teachers, the public, all stakeholders. So, I think we can certainly look at the strategic plan and say, do we need to change the specifics of it or just our goals? And I agree with Jeff, there's changes that have occurred over the last several years that have made priorities change. And, do you add safety under students first and foremost? I don't know. So I guess the other question is everybody willing to commit to either a morning, afternoon, or a day-long retreat? Time away from the job and that type of thing. So, and then it would be making what is the best day and where, and so on and so forth.
My question is, what for? What's the purpose? So once we establish the purpose, then sure, then we can decide how long it should be and when, and yeah.
When I originally proposed this idea, it was as a result of the NISBA, one of the NISBA meetings that we were at recently, and the question that had been posed was, what is your North Star as a board? And at the time I was new enough that I didn't have an immediate answer to that. And I thought, oh gosh, a board retreat, so we can figure out our North Star. Mm-hmm. But since I've come to understand that students first and foremost is our North Star, in my opinion. So there's that.
So if we do something informal, how long do you think you would need? You know, full day, half day, do it some evening?
I'd say like, a couple hours. It's just to kind of,
Yeah, to get to know each
on
other.
an informal basis, yeah, then I think it's just my opinion, whatever everybody else thinks.
Like a Saturday morning, for example.
I will remind you that after we come back, we're gonna be starting to work on the budget stuff also.
Right,
for
so it's a lot of extra.
The budget vote.
Yeah.
And that ends April?
The vote's in May.
That's in May. So we could do our retreat after that. Potentially. Or our social gathering.
And at that point in time, we may have 2 new board members too. Because 2 positions are open this year.
Yes.
Yes.
And you're rerunning, right, Rick?
I can't hear you.
Conveniently.
Connection in the floor.
So we come back.
Traditionally, these retreats are done in the summer and that type of thing. So I think that's where I'm having a hard time grasping where would we find the time. I think an extra meeting would definitely be in our best interest to discuss creating new goals for next year. And as Jeff brought up, prioritizing. So if we want to consider that a retreat and maybe have some team building or ice breaking type of things for 30, 45 minutes prior to a meeting, an informal meeting, I'm all for that.
Maybe a trust fall or two.
Uh-oh.
As long as you're there to catch me, please.
There you go. So, a little repelling and stuff.
Go to the Adirondack experience.
Yeah, there you go. Be short. Anything you can talk about on the zip line, you're good to go.
So I guess, do you want to discuss goals for next year within the current strategic plan at a separate meeting other than board meeting?
Rick, I think there's a way to do that. Probably the preliminary work can be done just through Google Docs or something like that, where everybody can comment on what we have right now, which I think is a very good working document. I refer to it before every meeting. And if there's any, in my mind, it's really updates to very specific things, as opposed to really just changing goals. I think this is a very good plan, and it seems to be working. So if we want to put it out there as a group document to make comments on, like we've done with other things, and that would probably be the first step. And then if we need a meeting to go to the next step to change it, then, and that would include, like you said, other stakeholders, then we go there. But maybe we don't need to go that far. Maybe there's not very much, if anything, to change. It's just a matter, maybe we should just review it. And we can do that, not without having to physically get together, but to collaborate using tools that we already have.
And then I think get back online with having a summer retreat.
Yeah.
With perhaps NISBA or with, Andy Robinson, whatever the board decides. But
right.
The summer is a perfect time, as Dan pointed out, there may be new board members or there might be the same, but we'll see. But we didn't have one this year, so I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, no, I think I agree. Yeah.
Any other comments? Whoops, Dan, that's your line.
That's okay.
Took his thunder.
Any others, comments? Okay. So we'll keep this discussion going and look at a summertime retreat. Okay, also under discussion is board communication. Jeff, you brought this up.
Right. Well, I think we've taken some positive steps already, and you know, getting it more prominent in the weekly newsletters. Those are really good. You know, we read those all the time. I think it hits a big part of our, you know, constituency by just by doing that. And I think we mentioned a little bit about maybe using the local media a little more effectively, getting our message out there, and you know, if we end up going with the direction of an electronic sign at the elementary school, that's something you could put up there. Again, you can do it either way, you know, on the signage. And we have Orta as well that we can use. I think we do that from time to time.
We do.
So there's other things we can do, and I don't know that we need to go much further than that. In my opinion, I think we've really already started the ball rolling in a positive direction.
Okay.
Yeah, so unless anybody has other, you know, thinks otherwise.
No.
No, thank you. I mean, it makes us all aware and cognizant of spreading the word and looking out for self-promotion, so to speak.
Yeah, and just getting the stakeholders really more involved in what we're doing, because I think that's always a good thing. So anyway, thanks.
Right. Any other discussion on that? Okay, minutes were under the consent agenda, and now we move into personnel items. First one is a long-term teaching staff appointment. Recommended action is upon the recommendation of the superintendent, Brian LaValle is hereby appointed to the long-term position of industrial/visual arts teacher in the middle and high school commencing on February 1st, 2019 until June 30th, 2019. The salary is $59,282. That's a step 18, master's plus 37, prorated of the teacher's salary schedule for the 2018-19 school year. I have a motion.
Yes.
Make a motion.
Thank you,
Second.
Brian.
Even though I think I might be second on it, I just had a louder voice.
Thank you, Joan. We could all vote. Or any discussion?
Oh, yeah, who's doing it? What's going on with it now?
So, Mr. LaValle has been teaching with us for a number of years on this kind of temporary basis because of certification issues. And at this point, Mr. LaValle is a certified teacher. He's certified in art, not industrial arts. He has his master's in industrial arts at an out-of-state institution, and he's now attempting to jump through the last hoop, which he didn't know he had to jump through, and many of us did not, because once he completed the master's, we thought that would be it. The last hoop is he's taking 2 additional courses. Fortunately, taking 2 additional courses is allows for a teacher in his position to be teaching in what we're going to call out of the area. He is fully expecting to finish these courses soon, and then to receive his what's called a supplemental certificate. That means supplemental to his art certificate, and that should be completed soon. And it's very hard to know with the teacher certification program.
I just want to say as a parent, I think this guy's a great teacher. So he's got my vote.
That's 6 yes. Motion carries. The second one is a long-term teaching staff appointment. Upon the recommendation of the superintendent, Holly Thomas is hereby appointed to the long-term position of secondary math teacher in the middle and high school, who is permanently certified in math 7 through 12, replacing Tammy Casey, commencing on January 2nd, 2019, until June 30th, 2019. Salary is calculated at $55,057. That's a step 12, master's plus 60. Prorated of the teacher's salary schedule for the 2018-19 school year. I have a motion.
Motion.
Thank you, Martha.
I'll second.
Jeff? Discussion?
Hey, Roger, just a question. If, while she's doing this, is this working towards her tenure, or does it just knock a year off her tenure?
It could potentially, but it doesn't, it's not a guarantee that it would knock a year off of tenure. That would be dependent on two things, one of which it would be that she's evaluated under the same standards that a probationary or tenure teacher would be evaluated. That would be first, and second would be that she would actually be appointed to a permanent position in the future, right, and continuous to this long-term substitute position. So we certainly have her on the list of teachers to be evaluated, according to the APPR standards. So hopefully we can meet that, and then we'll see what happens after that. I will say that, in this time of teacher shortage, especially in hard-to-staff areas like math, it's rare to be able to find a strong, certified, experienced teacher like Ms. Thomas. And we're really lucky to have her for the first semester, for a short term, to do maternity leave, and then, given the changes that we instituted for the new year, starting in January, that timing is working out well, and she's able and willing to make the change from 7th grade to 8th grade, and then to step in for Ms. Casey when Ms. Casey takes on the high school dean position. I think we're really fortunate to have her. So I'm glad to make this recommendation.
Thank you.
I've already voted yes, so this is not going to be contingent on my vote. I'm just curious, is she residing in the school district? Do you know?
Yes. She's renting something.
Okay.
Motion carries 6 yes. Moving on, other action items. Special education is information only at this meeting. Nothing to vote on under special education. We will vote on this packet in January 15th. So move into the adjournment phase. The next meeting date is January 15th.
Just to backtrack on your special ed information. And so I just like to remind everybody that, I don't know if you had a chance to read through the packet I have, and you may or may not have any questions or concerns, from which to base your vote. So if you do, just give me an early heads up, and we can always invite further explanation either from me or from our CSE chair, Sarah Allen.
Will she be in to talk to us about this before we vote, or is that something you just?
It's not the plan,
Right.
it's only on a as needed basis.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see anything that jumped out at me. Okay.
The only one that jumped out at me was the Northwood School.
So that question's come up before, and one of the things that we like to make sure, because we usually have unique students in these in our packets, and one of the things to know is that we are responsible for overseeing IEP development in private schools for out of district students, and that's just the way the law reads. So, and we happen to have more private schools than most small school districts, or at least small population school districts like ours. So we oversee a number of IEPs, for students from Northwood, from North Country School, and definitely from St. Agnes. And then, of course, on top of that, all of the pre-K students, the CPSE, operating as a CPSE, and evaluating the needs of children, as young as 2. Yeah, it's a pretty big job, pretty big responsibility.
Okay, old agenda topics. We all had homework from the last meeting, the board survey. If you could turn those into Karen. And
I'll just add in that a couple of old agenda topics that are no longer there, we've been tackling with our ad hoc committee meetings. They held a committee meeting on transportation, many of you did, and also we held an ad hoc committee meeting on community service. So we are chipping away at some of those expressions of interest that the board presented earlier in the year. We'll share some of those with you at the next meeting.
okay.
Thank you.
Strategic goal number 6 is listed there.
It's not the right ones. It's, if you look under, look on my screen here. These are the old agenda topics. I looked at them like, what is that? So these are the old agenda topics that, that didn't get moved into the agenda part, but it's on the board meeting control part.
So
Okay,
are we
so-
removing stuff?
Yes, we'll be removing the board retreat, the
Better communication?
better communication, the board self-evaluation. Well, I'll leave it on there because Rick's gonna wanna go over it at the next meeting. And then the ad hoc committees can go off also because they'll be reporting at the next meeting.
And the elementary playground,
Right, so that'll be a discussion with.
you
the schools.
forwarded that on
Yes.
to the elementary school?
Yes.
Okay. So any other old agenda topics, discussion? New agenda topics?
I don't know if this is if this would fall, but I was approached by a community member about how when they taught here way back in the day, they had school counselors that actually went to students' homes. And I was just wondering when, is that something,
So your typical school counselor,
Yeah.
I don't know where you'd want to go with it,
But
but your
yeah.
typical school counselor, we have 3, what I would consider, standard school counselors. Typically, school counselors don't make home visits. That doesn't mean that our school counselors haven't made home visits, but it's not a regular part of the job. Typically, if we're looking to make home visits, we'll be relying more on a social worker type of person, somebody who primary part of the job description will be home outreach. We also have a counselor who is a contract counselor through the prevention team, Tina Clark. She does a wonderful job. You've met her here before. She's done a presentation for us. She'll also do some work in the homes. So it's not like we don't, but we don't have that one position that would be, would provide that as a part of their regular job practice, which would be a social worker, which we don't have.
okay. I don't know,
I don't know if that answered enough,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
if that's something you want to follow up on.
I think it may be something I want to follow up on.
You want to, I guess I would add a new.
I added it.
Yeah. What'd you say?
School counselor home visits.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Any other new agenda items? adjournment of the meeting.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Liam.
Second.
Thank you, Mark. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Have a Merry Christmas.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Merry Christmas to everyone.
Safe travels.
Thank you.
It's interesting because
Good job. Yeah, yeah, see.